Hey everyone, Hamad here. Welcome to my channel, Cloud with Hamad, DIY Cloud Learning to Inspire. For today, our cloud series with AWS, I will be deploying an EC2 instance with VPC, which is Virtual Private Cloud. During the deployment, or I should say throughout the deployment, I will discuss what is Amazon VPC, what is the concept behind VPC, and how to access VPC, and then I'll show you how it works. Before we do that, if you're new to my channel, please subscribe, like, and share with friends. I would really appreciate it. Now, without further ado, let's go to our notes. Alright guys, so I'm on my notes here. As discussed, what we'll do is we'll actually talk about what Amazon VPC is, what's the concept behind VPC, how to access Amazon VPC, and then I'll show you a demo how to have VPC work. For doing the process, I will use a document from Amazon website, which is, I will leave the links. I already have a couple of links here, which I will leave in the video for you to see. During the whole process, we'll reference this document. I'll explain a little bit what VPC is. We'll give you a little bit of example, what VPC and Subnet is, security, and then how we would deploy an EC2 machine, what is route table, what is internet gateway throughout the lab. And then the plan is, what we'll do is, in this picture, what we'll do is, as you can see, this is a US East region. We'll probably take Virginia, and then in that we'll deploy a VPC of a CIDR block of 16, and then we'll also deploy two subnets. One is public and one is private, with a 1.024 and then 2.024, and then we'll both have a EC2 machine. One is public, so it would have a public facing. You can have a public IP address. I will explain what that is as well, and then you can connect to internet from there. No issues. I will deploy a internet gateway so that it can be this public subnet machine, which is EC2 machine. In this public subnet can be accessed, and then on private subnet we'll also deploy an EC2 machine, but that cannot be accessed through public. So what we'll do is we'll also deploy a EC2 machine, or maybe a NAT gateway through which we can access this EC2. This is sort of a jump box, so we'll use this machine to connect to this machine, or you can use this to go out and go to the public to internet. And then we'll discuss a little bit of how the traffic routes, how router works, and then how the traffic goes back and forth. All right, so let's get to the lab. As mentioned, I will leave a couple of links which will be in the documentation that I follow, but the plan is that once I'm going to start deploying these items, and then we'll quickly also discuss what these items are, even region, VPC, so that it is a little bit of one-on-one. I don't want to do slides because I think slides are okay. I mean, it's good to have, but it's good for us to reference this document, because I always say that's the best information you can get is through this, through the website or through the documentation. All right, so let's go into our deployment. All right, guys, so as you can see, I'm already logged into my AWS console, and you can see this is Virginia region, and then these are all the services that are listed for Amazon. You can actually type in to this and type in VPC, and you should get a service VPC, or you can just click here, drop down menu, and you can look for VPC, and it's in the network and content delivery section of AWS. So you can click on VPC and go through from there. First thing first, on your right, I opened this document for you. How to get to this document, pretty simple. I actually found this on VPC section. So if I click on VPC here, it opens up the page, and then you can see this is a landing page for Amazon VPC, and you can also launch other network services from here. This actually tells you how many VPCs running. There is one default VPC that is already created with service, which is, I'm going to explain a little bit further on this. And then East Virginia region has 6 availability zone. So if I click on it, it has 6 subnets. So if I click on it, it will show you that, hey, there is 6 subnet deployed in this region. You can have, and this is, you can see up here, it says East 1, and these are the owner ID 1A1, A2Z. These are all the locations that available is on, and I'll explain that in a second here as well. So let's go back to the dashboard here, and then you can see there's no NAT gateway. NAT gateway is basically for outbound traffic from private to public, and then we don't have peering. We will definitely like deploy some routes. Internet gateway, we just have a default internet gateway right now because we have a default VPC, and I'll explain that in a second. This document actually tells everything, and what I was trying to tell you is if I come here, it tells you VPC documentation, and when I click on this document, this is where this document opens up. It tells you where the user guide. Click on this, and then you would have all the VPC documentation here, and it is an amazing document. I would recommend you should go through this, but we will go through this together, but also I will leave some link and you can go up here and do this from there. Okay, so first thing first, we need to understand what VPC is. So first, Amazon VPC Virtual Private Cloud enables you to launch AWS resources into a virtual network that you have defined. So basically it's telling you that you can deploy AWS resources like EC2 or RDS in a virtual network that we will define. So basically Amazon VPC is the networking layer for Amazon EC2. If you are new to Amazon EC2, see what EC2 is, and we will discuss it further. The stuff that is required to, and then it also says that a default VPC has the benefit of advanced features provided by EC2 VPC and is ready for you to use. If you have default VPC, you don't specify a subnet. So basically what happens every time you land into your VPC dashboard, there is a default VPC already created, and this is for, that's what it's showing, that you know it is what basically tells you that subnet that you create also create a own. So it says default VPC, you can launch your instance into your default VPC without needing to know anything about the Amazon. So like the services like Lightsail or SageMaker for you guys, or even Code Deploy, or I would say any CI/CD pipeline tools that code commits, you don't need to know what VPC is. For fundamental knowledge, yes, you do. I need to understand what it is, but technically, this is the default VPC you need to deploy all your services. And obviously, when you have a solution architect in your team, they already create a default. They already create a gateway, subnet, or a network, a VPC that is more secure, and that would be considered as your default VPC. Okay, so first thing what we'll do is I'll explain this in a second here. Let's go to this document here. This is basically another link that I found out, and I'll share that link for you. So as I mentioned that, you know, this is Virginia region, US East 1A. So what is region? First of all, I need you guys to know that an AWS region is a collection of availability zone. You can think of a region as containing multiple data center within the same geographical area with no shared fault domain. For example, a region with 2 availability zone would be a good fit for disaster recovery with synchronous replication. AWS has 12 regions across the world. So basically what they're saying is this Virginia region, it has, well, technically we saw 6 subnets, so it's probably have 6 availability zone. So they all are basically available zone, which would be good fit for disaster. So if one of the zone goes down, you can actually still use the service from other available zone. How do I know? So if I click on this subnet, it shows that these are 6 subnets, and with the CIDR block, which we'll talk about it. And you can see if I click here, it tells you US East 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and 1F. Okay, so that is the first thing. And then what is availability zone? So like we talking about is availability zone. An availability zone is a set of building, internet uplink, and power. You can think of it as a data center because some availability zone contain more than one physical data center. There are currently 33 availability zone worldwide, and application deployed in a single availability zone is not considered highly available. So basically it's saying that, it's a set of building, it's like a data center. It has internet uplinks where you can connect to internet, and then its data center is basically segregated across different, I would say, around the world. So it is availability zone contain more than one physical data center, and what the document says is there are 33 availability zones worldwide. An application deployed in single availability zone is not considered highly available. What it's saying is that if you have deployed an application which is in one like 1A zone, it is not replicated, or it's not deployed in another subnet, which I will discuss a little bit further down the video. Then it's just, if that availability zone goes down, then your application is down. So that's what it's trying to explain this here. Okay. Instance is just like a virtual machine. We'll talk a little bit about more on instance, and then I'm still working on another another video of EC2. You should be able to basically take a look at it. So and over here we already saw, and I gave an example of regions are North Virginia US East 1, which is where we are, and North Carolina US West 1, which is this one. And you should design all traffic flow between AWS region as you would for internet traffic, transit traffic, through all the same cases. So that's a little bit about region and availability zone. Let's quickly talk about VPC. So what is virtual private cloud? Virtual private cloud is a set of contained subnet with a common class / inter-domain routing, that is CIDR block, up to 16 mark, running in a single geographical region across multiple data center, that is availability zone. A VPC is like a virtual data center, except that it is physically spread out across availability zone. A VPC has a network connectivity within the region, and in which they are connected. You can use internet connectivity, virtual private network connectivity, and VPC pairing, which is a little advanced. VPC and other addresses you can address you own is RFC. Okay, don't need to worry about that. Multiple account, you can have that. Okay, so technically, if I go back to this document, it's what is VPC. It says virtual private cloud enables you to launch AWS resources into a virtual network. Yeah, that means that AWS resources like internet gateway, subnet, all these services up here on my left actually, elastic IP, endpoint for different services, NAT gateway, even if you want to do site-to-site VPN or firewall, or security group, you have to use Amazon VPC, that is the virtual private cloud network. So enables you to launch AWS resources into virtual cloud network that you define. The virtual network closely resemble a traditional network, basically what we used to had on premises, that you do operate in your own data center. So like if you have a data center somewhere and you are a network administrator, so you will take a look at like how the connectivity is happening, routers, switches, MPLS line, I would say SD-WAN, WAN, but everything is basically being moved to cloud. So all you do is you work through VPC and deploy your VPC, I would say, services through Amazon VPC. Okay, so Amazon VPC is a network layer for Amazon EC2. If you are new to Guide, which we already talked, in this process, we will actually discuss a little bit of what subnet is and what is the difference between default and non-default. I think we already talked about the fact that every time you have if you have an account, that's what it says, then you would have a default VPC basically. Why? It is basically the benefit of advanced feature provide EC2 VPC and is ready for you to use. If you have a default VPC and don't specify a subnet, when you launch an instance, the instance is launched into your default VPC, which is basically why, because when a VPC is launched, there are certain like route tables, I would say subnet, and different items which we'll discuss are created automatically. And that's what it's saying, that hey, if you don't want to do VPC, if you don't want to deploy VPC, there is a VPC that is already here. So if I click on this one, this VPC is already created as a default, and it has a CIDR block of 172.16, and then DHCP main route. This is a main route table. There's a network access control list, default tenancy, and then VPC is, you can see this says default. Yes. Okay. So that is done. What we'll do is let's go and start deploying VPC, and then we will talk about this here. And both of these documents are amazing to have. So again, you come to this landing page, and then you go to your VPC here. And then also, I think I should also mention this, is when you create a VPC, these are the main things that you need to look at: subnet, route table, internet gateway. If you are doing egress traffic, you should use this. Otherwise, for basic fundamental subnet, route table, internet gateway, if you want to attach an elastic IP, you can do that as well. Some endpoints for S3 bucket or anything that is database, you can use it from here. NAT gateway, and then if you want to connect two VPC together, you can do VPC pairing, or even a VPC into a different region, you can use that. And then network access control list, which is where you're gonna, I think there's layer 7 security over there. And then security group is to basically define the port inbound and outbound rules for any traffic to go through it. And then firewall, we won't discuss much on this, but I think I have several videos that I made on virtual private network, which is customer gateway, how to set up site-to-site VPN. Feel free to take a look at those, and feel free to reach out if you need to. And then we'll go through these one by one in our other videos, but for now we'll just keep it fundamental, and then we'll go through this. Okay, so let's not delay this. Let's go to deploying the solution first. So once again, we will come here, and then again we will have a region which we discussed, US East, with a CIDR block of 16. We'll have VPC, and then two subnet. One is public private, network access control, route table. And I think I already mentioned what region is to you guys, so I want to make sure that you guys will reference this document again. I do have my notes as well, so I think I can also share them eventually. And what we'll do is, let me show you. So I have a solution architect notes. That this is when I was preparing for my solution architect, and then we're going to discuss a little bit about what VPN is, how to create our own lab. This is a step-by-step guide, which is what we're going to do. Like this is how I did when I was studying for architect solution, and then we can talk about custom eVPC, LVC, and then direct connect. What is direct connect? I have nothing in there, but I can explain a little bit of summary on all these. I did study off a Cloud Guru, and I think there was another course that I took, and then I did also a little bit about Share the Academy. All right, so let's get into our solution here. So first thing first, once you get to the landing page, click on your VPC, and you would hit Create VPC. Once we get here, you need to give a name of that VPC. I would say you can give anything. I say VPC Hamad, and I can always give a region, US East. Okay, and then CIDR block, as mentioned, we will 10.0.0.0/16. And then IPv6, where there's two types of IP, IPv4 and IPv6. So let's quickly do this as well. Class I'll discuss in a bit here, but let's do difference between IPv4 and IPv6. So IPv4 is a 32-bit IP address, where IPv6 is 128-bit IP address. If you are not an advanced network guy, I would suggest to definitely take a look at advanced networking for subnetting, IP addresses, and how the network works. There's a specialty course for AWS as well, but you can Google it and it explains a little bit. I will just leave the link as well for you guys, or you can just Google it over there. Okay, so again, we will take the CIDR block of 16. So if I go up here, and I'll just extend this a little bit here. So I did 10.0.0.0/16. This is the website, cider.xyz. So it tells you that the net mask is 255.255.0.0. First usable IP is 10.0.0.1, and it goes up to 254. Total IP is 65,536. In Amazon, they tend to keep 5 IPs for network addresses, and it's like they want to keep the 5 address, and there's a definition to it why they want to do is for network equipments, and then different I do know what it was, so I can definitely share a link, but Amazon tend to keep 5 IPs for these are called reserves IPs. If I type in, let's say if I want to type in AWS reserved IP, so following 5 IP addresses are reserved: network address, VPC router address, DNS server, future for future use, and network processor. So I mean, I don't want to confuse you, but that, like, the out of these 65,000, 5 of them are kept by Amazon for all these devices. Okay, so default tenancy means that, you know, do you want to have shared like zone, or you can have like a dedicated role. So you can run instance in your VPC on single tenant dedicated hardware. Select dedicated to ensure that instance launch in this VPC are dedicated tenancy instance, regardless of tenancy attributes specific at launch. Select default to ensure that instance launch in the VPC use the tenancy. So, you know, it tells you that if you want your own like own rack of equipment, you would just use default. You can create a dedicated one, or you can just do a default. Okay, and then you can tag your VPC with them, and then once you just basically hit create, give the name CIDR block. I don't want IP6. In US, most of the providers are moving to IPv6, which is 128-bit, but I will just keep it to once. Okay. Next, we have created VPC. Now, next thing is once we create a VPC, I would want to show you there are a couple of items that get open. That is, we don't have a subnet. We have to create a subnet. So you can see there is no subnet that was created, but we would see route table, which actually got created. So if you look up here, there are 2 route table that was created. One was actually with the default VPC, and the other was with the one that I created. As you can see here, it says VPC Hamad. This is a main routing table. So we will create 2 different routing. One is for inbound and outbound, and I'll explain that once we get to routing as well. And then internet gateway, I'll also explain that what happens over there. Network ACL that got created. You can see there is one network ACL that was created. VPC Nakal Hamad. And then security group, we have to create a security group eventually. And it says that, you know, there are 2 VPCs that was created, and one is ours in there. Okay, so that is done. Let's go to subnet. So what we did was in our diagram, we first used this zone, and then we created a 10.16. Now we will create subnet, 1 private and 1 public. So let's go here, subnet, create subnet. once we had to create subnet, this is says VPC ID. Create a subnet in this VPC. So I already created a VPC. So if I drop down, you can see there are two default VPCs. One is under my name, that is what we created, and one was the default as we discussed with 172 CIDR block. Ours is 10.0.16. So we'll use this one, and then we will give name. So this would be public subnet, and I will say US East, and then over here you can define which zone you want, 1, 2. So I would say US East 1, that is US East 1A. You can put it in any of the zones if you like. I just kept it here. And then you need to give CIDR block for, so you're going to subnet the CIDR block of 1016. So break that down further. So because that's 65,000 IP is a lot. So what we do 10.0.1.0/24. And this is for the first subnet. And then we'll also create another subnet. You can have multiple. This is at first they used to have, you have to do two times the same thing, but now you can easily do same thing. And this one we will just do subnet of so I would say public, so I would say private subnet, and then 1B. Let's keep it like that. You can also secure your network by making sure that one subnet is public and one subnet is private. Totally your call. How depends on how your architecture is. So we're going to use 1B, and then the CIDR block again 10.0.2.0/24. Actually, let's do this. Let's say 10.0.0. You can do this tagging if you like. And I would do the same thing for this one, dash 10.0.1.0, and then I would 1B, and then I will hit create. You can have multiple subnets here, but we'll just go with this here. So what's going to happen is we have created two subnets. One is public and one is private. As per our notes here, we created two subnets, public 10.1.0 and then private 1.0. Okay, so now what we'll do is, let me explain a little bit on this here first. Let's go back to documentation. Anatomy of VPC. As we talked about default VPC, it gets created for people like programmer or developer to use this if they don't want to get into knowing what VPC is. But I highly encourage for people to look a little bit understand how it works. So it's more easier. Okay, so what is default VPC? I would not worry about a subnet. A subnet takes a variable portion of CIDR block assigned to the VPC. Traditionally, subnet rules and notation applies. So take care in subnet sizing and design an address range that does not overlap with on-premises data center or other VPC. So they are saying that subnet should not overlap, and I won't worry about a little bit. I mean, if you are really talking about architecture, you can go through this and I will explain it. But a subnet is specific to an availability zone. That is important. And then it can have multiple subnet per availability zone. Each subnet has a single route table associated, and each subnet is associated with a network access control list. So I think I already explained that to you. We created two subnet, right? So, but it had one route table. This is the one. This is the main route table. It is usually we don't touch main route table, but this is where I will explain a little bit about route table in a bit. And then it tells you multiple subnet per availability zone. You can do that as well. AWS uses 5 addresses in each subnet. The first 4 and last 4 addresses, the minimum subnet. So yeah, I think we talked about why we have 5 reserved IPs. And then the minimum subnet size is 28. That is, if I go here and do 28 here, and it tells you there's a 16 count of subnet here. So this is probably going to just tell you the same thing. Subnet, which is 11 addresses, subnet can have really large. So 11 address plus 5 is 16. So that's what we're saying. The minimum, smallest you can take is 28 net mask. Okay. Okay, so now you can have elastic load balancer, IP addresses. We can talk a little bit further on that a bit. You can see reference to public and private subnet. The shortcut of saying whether a subnet has a direct route to internet is public or not. Otherwise, there are no difference. Typically, a public subnet has a direct access to internet. A private subnet has no external access. So quickly go back to this document. So two subnets, public and private. This one has access to internet, and because it says public, but we will actually associate that public with an internet gateway, so it can go inbound and outbound traffic. Private subnet doesn't have access to internet because it is basically getting connected to a NAT gateway, which is usually deployed in public subnet. NAT gateway actually connects with outbound traffic, not coming inbound, just going out. Can be used, so let me explain this. A NAT gateway is installed in public subnet so that EC2 in the same VPC can connect to that public NAT gateway, and that public NAT gateway is the gatekeeper. So it will use this NACL and route table to go to the internet. This EC2 cannot directly go outside, even though you can see the connectivity, but it does not get through this internet gateway. It needs to go through here, and that gets deployed through internet gateway. So we'll talk about it. Typically, a public subnet has direct access to internet. A private subnet has no internet external access. It connects through a virtual private gateway to on-premises data center. Yeah, we can do that as well. Or uses network address translation. Yeah, we can. We did talk about NAT or internet bound traffic. Subnet also have setting called auto assign public IP address, which can give an instance to public. So when we create an EC2, you will basically allow that EC2 machine to connect to internet. So you will, I'll show you in a second here. Okay, so once that is done, next thing is we'll do route table. So every subnet has a route table, which I already showed you up here. So if I click here, you can see there's a route table of mine. So I would just make sure I have RT Hamad, save. So this route table has routes. It tells you, we'll talk about it. It has a route, which is any traffic that is 1016. It can go through that VPC, it can connect to any VPC. So we will actually define this route to internet gateway, and any machine on this subnet can connect through this route and will go through internet gateway. I'll explain that. I'll try to explain that. Basically, for example, a private subnet might have a route table with a default route to NAT gateway. That means that the other will create two different routes. This is a main route. This is pretty much private right now. It does not have, its propagation is not happening here. So we'll create another one, which is a public route and a private route, and then we'll use internet gateway on public and the NAT on private. I'll explain in a bit here. So it is tempting to describe route table as being similar to virtual networking forwarding. I won't worry about that. Route table consists of route that points to either block to an instance, which I talked about it, or internet gateway, or virtual private gateway or NAT gateway. So, or Vpc. We'll explain that in a second here. Once default route table is automatically attached to a new subnet unless they are manually associated with different route. For higher level of control and flexibility, create. So we already know that we have a route table with the default. When there was a default subnet, a route was created for that as well. Okay, so second thing, we will already have defined two subnets. Once it's private and public. The best way to segregate it is I would just go here. I'll take this VPC ID. I'll copy it and I'll come here, paste, and then I would have two of them. Okay, so route table, once we get here, we'll create a route, and I would say public RT public dash Hammad, and then we will select our VPC, that ones that we created, and then nothing, we just create a route, and then we will also create another route, usually the default route for the VPN, that VPC we created, usually we use that, but I think I would just, for clarity, we'll use that one as private Hammad RT, and then we'll select our VPC here. I will create that as well. Okay, so now we have two routes. Actually, we have three routes based on what we know. If I paste this here and hit enter, okay. It's probably because of the windows that I have open here. So I would click this. Anyways, let me maximize this here. You can see here we have three routes. One is public, one is private, and one is the main route. We tend to use the private for this one, but I created just for you guys to have an understanding. Now, internet gateway, it is very important. So let's say if I want, let me show you something as well. Let's do this here. So I would just give me a second here. Not this. Close this. My bad. Okay, and then security group is another place. We will use the security. We will create the security when we are doing EC2 machine. Network access control list. Let's talk about a little bit. Network access control are applied per subnet and provides a broader stroke than security group. These would be used like VLAN ACL or layer 2 ACL. ACL is access control list. True, there is no layer 2 in VPC. Access control, network access control are ordered and have permit and deny action. Usually, I've seen most people just use security group, but if it's like more like a network layer security, you would work with network AC2. And then it talks about a little bit about ENI, public IP. A public IP address is publicly route table address that is reachable from the internet. There are two types of public IP addresses in VPC: dynamically assigned addresses and elastic addresses. By default, instance connected to the internet service are dynamically assigned. So, and then there is a EIP, that is elastic IP address, is static IP address. So if you want a dedicated IP address for a machine, you would do a EIP assigned to it. It is sometimes called a sticky session. Yeah, that means that every time you reboot, you would get the same IP address. Cost of VPC, also important. A lot of people ask. VPC, security group, and route table, internet gateway, virtual private gateway, network ACL, ENI are free. Once again, VPC, security group, route table, internet gateway, VPC, and ENI are free. VPN connection have an hourly charge. Each elastic IP address have a cost if they are not associated with an instance. So elastic IP is just like, you know, they gave you an IP that is a dedicated IP. Obviously you are not using it, but you would say that it's free, but no, it is not free, because they gave you this and this is under your authority. Whether you use it or not use it, they want to charge you. If an instance has more than one elastic IP, or one instance is remapped over more than 100 times a month, inbound traffic for the internet is free. Outbound traffic has data transfer fee. Once again, a lot of people ask about inbound traffic for internet is free and outbound traffic has data transfer fee. There is a data transfer fee between availability zone. For additional, you can go through this. External connection, we talked about this. VPN gateway, I have some videos on how you can connect to different customers or NAT gateway. This would cost us a little bit. So let's go here. Let's go and deploy a EC2 machine first, and then I will come back to internet gateway and we'll attach internet gateway for you guys to know what I'm talking about. So far I have done a region, VPC, 2 subnets. We discussed a little bit about a NAT and EC2. What we're going to do EC2, I already talked about route table, and then we're going to do create an internet gateway as well. First, we'll go to EC2. This is another machine, just like VPC, VM actually. So once we get here, this is the dashboard. There is nothing going on, no instance. So that was a dashboard for EC2. So if I click on it, it tells you there's nothing going on, no elastic IP, no instance, no instance is running, no snapshot. There's two security group, which we already saw there. So we come here, hit instance, and then we would launch an instance. And then Windows, let's just keep it simple. So these are all this is called Amazon machine images. This is basically a marketplace. This is like where Amazon has all their VMs, images, just like images, or if Docker Hub or Kubernetes, they uses images, or any other repository. So Git, you can have repository for on the Git, and you can have your own registry, and you can download images from there. This is the same way where Amazon Marketplace, different companies have set up their images, and you can download from them for a cost or something like that. So once again, we come here, we'll take the free edition. So Windows base 64, let's keep this one. And then once we get here, I'm probably not going to define this. We probably will have another session for EC2, but for now this is just a VPC, so we'll just keep it VPC. I'll just go through quickly. This page actually tells you, that other page was to select which images you should use. This page actually tells you that you just have to select T2, that is the family size, the processor of T2 family. There's multiple families you can use, and T2 selected micro, ECU, 1 CPU. These are all the generations. So I will so in my notes, there's a lot of stuff here in EC2. So EC2, how do you set it up, what type of instance it is, security group, what is the lab, and then what is block. Also, it tells you models and everything. So in our next session, when we talk, I will give you a little bit about more on how EC2 family size is. This is the family size I was talking about, where we're going to use a T2 micro, or T2 is lowest cost general purpose web server install small DB. So this is all on the website. You can select that. I think I selected T2. And then all generation or T2 medium. If you have a free account, you can use free eligible, and there's not cost associated for a year. And then we'll just T2 medium. Next, over here it tells you how many instance you need. Do you need to auto scale? Right now we don't, but if you can set up here as well. And then over here it tells you, you can have a spot instance, where just like stock market, where you are bidding for a instance and the price is a little cheaper. If I click here, it says you have the option to request spot instance, specify the maximum price you're willing to pay per instance. There's different conditions to it. We'll talk about it later on a EC2 section. Network, Over here it's showing up as default. What we'll do is we'll select ours, which is the one that we created, and then it tells you this is two subnets that are available. One is public and private. Since we talked about this is going to be a public EC2 over here, we will just use this public subnet. And then over here, auto assign IP. We want this machine to be assigned to the internet, to be connected to the internet. So we will have enable. Will basically, it doesn't, so request a public IP address from Amazon public address to make your instance reachable from the internet. In most cases, the public address is associated with the instance until stop or terminated, which is no longer available for your use. If you require a persistent public IP addresses, you can use any IP. What we talked about, hey, you know what, if you want a sticky session or something that every time you reboot or do whatever, you get a dedicated IP, you would do a EIP. Right now we enabled it. Even though we enabled a public IP, it's still not going to connect to the internet because we haven't attached internet gateway to it, which I will show you in a second here once we deploy this. What it makes sense, what it means that, you know, in order for this machine to connect to internet, we need to attach internet gateway, which is basically it. I'll explain in a second here. Enable placement group. You want to have a group that would use this. For now, we'll just leave it this. Won't worry about it. Monitoring tool will go through our next video when we do storage. Right now, it is a root storage of 30 gig. This is a standard Windows machine. So, and then, you know, IOPS is 100 by 3000 input output. Throughput is not available. You can, when you are selecting the family of the machine, this is where if you're doing high throughputs input output, you use family, like you would say. So if I look here, and so high disk throughput, map reduce base workload, systems such as HDFS, MapReducer, or SQL, NoSQL, video encoding. So if I do want a video a machine that would do video encoding, I would use G3, not D3. You know, so the guy Ekaguro, he mentioned that you can have a synonym called Fight Dr. McPixie AU, that is Fight. So they gave a name that you would remember how it works. Anyways, so go back here, click next. You can do EC2. Actually, you would go name. This is tagging. EC2 public, and click next. Security group, you want, what is a security group? So basically this is security group. Let me see if I can find something for you here on security group. Security group is basically you would want to allow or deny the traffic. Here you go. A security group is like an access control list, typically applied to router and firewall, except that it is applied directly to the instance. Security group handles the bulk of security in AWS to protect instance and allow fine-grained security per instance. Security group are stateful and take TCP, UDP, ICMP connection. Security group contains security group rules, which are like access control list entries. So basically, let's say, let me explain this to you. I would want to create a security group. So let's say Hamad security. So I would say public EC2 Hamad security group. This is the name. I said public. And now, in order for me to remote into the machine, so I'm at home right now. So for me, if I need to remote in, I need to specify what IP address I'm gonna connect through to connect to this machine. So for Windows, you are basically RDPing into the system. So what is RDP? RDP is a protocol, RDP protocol. And it works on port 3389. So what is used for, I would just give you a remote desktop protocol is Microsoft proprietary protocol that enables remote connection to your computer, typically over TCP port. It provides network access from remote users too. So this is pretty basic. If I want to just use my machine, I would just say my IP and it would pick up my IP, right? Or I can just do anywhere. Anyone can connect to this machine because it's a public. For now, we'll just use my IP. And then you can add multiple rules. You can, like, if it's an HTTP, you want to install IIS. So let's say HTTP, and then HTTP IIS server works on 80 port. And then anyone connect to that IP address that will be created here can connect to HTTP. I'm just going to keep it as HTTP. Maybe we'll go further and install IIS. Click review. Again, it tells you the summary, Windows Server, and then it tells you what security group, what ports are open, instant details, storage, tag, and then we'll launch. Once we launch, it's going to ask you, hey, what's the key pair you want? Do you want a key pair? I say, yes, I want. So I would say VPC SG. This is the security key pair. So this will, once this is created, either it's a Linux or it's a Windows, it will create a security password. Sometimes it's called SAS token, or sometimes it's called public key, private key, or it will, for this Windows, it will give us a PEM or PEK file, as it says up here, PEM file, and this will create a password for me to log into that machine. I'll show you in a second here. Click launch. I will download first. Once I download, it's going to ask me, hey, where do you want to download? I would say download VPC security group, save, and once this is saved, I will launch the instance. So this is now starting to launch the instance. So even though this is all deployed, it still won't work. Only reason behind that is we haven't attached this machine to any of the internet or internet gateway, or we haven't even defined the network. So I think we need to attach. It says pending. The reason behind this, there is no internet gateway, or there's. So let's go back to VPC and click here. Internet gateway. I believe I should have gotten the interway. So internet gateway, there is an internet gateway already attached to a default VPC. So what we'll do is we create our own internet gateway, and we say VPC Hammad IGW, and click create. And once we hit create, it's going to say the following internet gateway was created. You can now attach the VPC to enable VPC to communicate with the internet. So again, in order for a machine or any resource to connect to internet, only public facing, you need to have an internet gateway, which is attaching here, and we'll drop down here and it tells you that, hey, this is the VPC that you had. You can connect to it, and then you can actually have a command line interface, SDK, or you can connect through that as well. Click attach. And now I have a VPC attached. Now I have an internet route gateway here. Route will come here. So internet gateway. Let me see if I can find internet gateway. Here you go. Internet gateway. Despite its name, an internet gateway isn't a single physical device. It is similar to an equal cost multipath ECMP route to set internet router. A single internet gateway is considered highly available within a region without any other action, just as if you had multiple equal cost route to the same destination. And then, it tells you how to connect to instance and blah blah blah. Where I just showed you what it is. So route table. Once again, we want to make sure that we route any traffic that is on public subnet. So if you remember, we created the EC2. And that EC2 I defined as, we said, hey, you know what, it needs to be connected to subnet 1A, which was, we said it would be a private subnet. So this subnet, so this public subnet, it needs to be connected, route needs to be defined for this subnet. So I would come here. There is public, so I would click on this one. and I would do association. Association means that this is a little bit defines on what this route table is. This is a route it will take. So right now there is any traffic that is with CIDR block 16 can work within this network, but it doesn't tell you that it needs to go outbound to internet. So for that, we will go ahead and we'll click on edit route, and we'll add a route. Add route means any traffic that is 000, any traffic that comes to this subnet would go to internet gateway. Click on internet gateway, it will load this, and I would save the changes. Again, we define the route how any machine or any device that is installed, that is basically deployed into this subnet, which is what we did. So if I go here, again, let me show you. So if I go here and I click on EC2, see, now it's running. Before that it was pending because it wasn't attached to any internet gateway. So if you remember, I assigned this EC2 to a public subnet. So if I click on networking here, you can see that there is this subnet called public subnet.us east 1, and it is attached to this EC2. That means that we said if this machine is created, give me an IP address, which is a public IP address, and it has a private IP address, and we will talk about EC2 in another video, but this is basically mostly about VPC. So I'm just showing that, you know, this is how a route is being associated. Anyway, so once this is done, also we want to make sure that we associate the route. So right now we just said for public, any traffic that goes, actually this is just refresh. For public, route table, sorry, I'm installing subnet. So public, route table, either a traffic goes inside this CIDR block can talk to each other, or for any traffic that is coming to 000, it would go hit the internet gateway. So per this picture, any EC2, anything in this public subnet with a 000 traffic would go to internet gateway through this route table. Okay, then we'll go here and we will also associate this subnet. Subnet association is basically telling, let me explain this here. So if I click no subnet, you do not have a subnet association, subnet without explicit association, the following subnets have never been explicitly associated with any route table, and therefore associated with the main route table, which is, this is still public, this is still private. So I would hit associate, and then I will pick, since this is a public subnet, I will associate with public route. Public route, this I will associate with public subnet. Okay, save, and then this is all good. Now we'll go to private subnet, and then in private subnet, what we'll do is we'll actually need to assign a NAT gateway to this private. Same thing what we did with internet gateway. Let's do it again as well. Let's keep it simple. For NAT gateway, we'll just go ahead and hit NAT gateway, create a NAT gateway, and I would say VPC NAT, and then what subnet. So for NAT gateway, what happens is, let me explain this, and it is very important to understand. NAT gateway always get deployed in a public subnet, but it gets associated with private subnet. So I am going to deploy this in our public subnet, but it will associate in private subnet. So I'll explain this so that, you know, any traffic that is in private cannot have inbound access, it can only have outbound access. So, and I think definition would say the same thing. Let's see if I can find this here. A NAT gateway acts like an ECMP route to set NAT device. These devices will do network address translation and port address translation. That is NAT and PAD. Single public elastic IP previously was common for single NAT instance or highly available instance. Yeah, that's what we talked about it. Either I can have a EC2 machine that would be as a jump box, or it's critical to understand. NAT gateway operates in a single availability zone. This differs from internet gateway, virtual private gateway that are highly available across. This means if you have service in multiple availability zones, you should have a NAT gateway, which is what we are doing right now. Anyways, so a little confusing, but I'll explain this. A NAT gateway needs to be deployed in public subnet, but it will get associated, and you have to have an IP address, a static IP address. So I will hit allocate IP address. Elastic IP. They gave me an IP address. You can have click here and get info. We'll talk about it in a second here. We'll create. Once that is created, I would go back to my route table, and even though I deployed in public, I will use my private route table. So any traffic that is private will have a 0, 0 route would go to NAT gateway. And then, so means that no traffic is coming in, only traffic is going out, and that traffic can only go out through a NAT gateway. And NAT gateway is also a secure place where any traffic from EC2 will connect to NAT gateway, and NAT gateway will decide where the traffic needs to go out or inbound. It is sort of security feature, I would say, that you can do. And associate, again, we can associate this to a private instance. Route table. Update route table, RTB route table is successful. And then public, private, subnet association. Nothing is subnet associated. One subnet is left, so I would edit, and over here okay, and it's already, I think it's already associated. Private, and save association. All right, so I think most of our stuff is done. So if I go back here, we have created subnets. Security group is already there. One EC2 machine, one NAT machine, route table are associated. One is public is connected with this one, and private is connected to this one. So we'll deploy another machine, which would be in our public subnet. So let's go here. Okay. So go back here, EC2, and then create an EC2. We'll check in a second here how the other things are going for that EC2 that we deployed into public. Create a new instance, so we'll create a launch an instance. Same thing, we'll just pick up any images, which is 2019. I'll just pick up 2019 base. You can do 16 as well, doesn't matter. And then again, the family size, we'll talk about it later. T2 medium, this I just use this because it loads faster than others. Next, over here, again, we selected our VPC, and it tells us that, hey, do you want this to be deployed in public or private? Since this is a private EC2, we'll select EC2 private, and then you can see that subnet is disabled. That means that auto assign IP address is not given to this machine. So even though this get deployed, but it won't have public IP, we'll just have a private IP so that you cannot connect. So I'll show you in a second here. Everything seems the same. Next, name, we can give them a name. configure, and then we can give a pvt ec2 sg, same thing. We'll keep it as RDP. We can remote in to that machine. I can do HTTP and install IIS, but I need to do load balancer, and then we want to make sure that exposing that load balancer to port 80 so that you can connect to application within that private subnet. But that is a little too much for you guys for now. We'll just keep it this. You can use my IP. Actually, we'll just leave it anywhere because we won't be able to connect anyways onto that. Again, launch. Key pair I already have, which I already did, or maybe I should create another key pair just for the sake of it. Download, save, and launch. And then we hit views. Now we will connect to our EC2 machine. I'm gonna use my machine Mobox. This is my tool. I like using this tool. So again, this is a third-party tool. You can connect to this. So click session. Well, hit, and this is an RDP machine. Click RDP. I'm gonna go back here for a second, and then I will pick an IP address for the public network. So 18.2. So let me explain this here. So if it was a private machine, and if I click on 10.10.0, it won't connect because it's a private IP, just like this one. So if I use this IP address, because you can see this is being running, check is happening, but there's no public IP because we did not assign an IP address. It will just have a 10 dot. So if I copy this, or even if I go here and copy this and go to my tool and say IP ec2.user, and then I would hit connect. It won't. Oh yeah, it probably will because it has my IP. Let's see if I can. Oh, actually, it might, because it might be connected to this. So let's get a password first. I'll check in a second here. So click here, connect. Interesting. Okay, click here, and then same IP, public IP. I use this a login. Oh, okay, I get it. The password should be administrator. EC2, it won't let us connect because I don't have a password for EC2. So I would cancel this. I would go back here. I would copy the IP address and paste here. And then I would say administrator. And I would hit OK. And then over here, I need to basically get the password. So in order for me to get the password, I click here and browse that key pair. So if I cancel this here a second, go back here. And if I want to connect to this, I would hit connect here. I'll move this here for a second. And then it tells you that, hey, in order for you to connect to this machine, you can download RDP file. You click on it, it will give you a download. And then you use this IP address and this username. And then in order for you to get into this machine, you need to get a password. So if you click here, it tells you that, hey, decrypt the password. You need to have a key pair, which is what we created, a PPC SG. You click here and you would browse it to download and Vpc SG. Okay, so select this key pair and this would decrypt. Usually I keep all this till I am doing the lab. So I'll copy this into a notepad just for the sake of it. And then I would hit decrypt password and it gives me the password. I usually copy this till I'm doing the lab. For my sake, I go back here and I would go back here and I would hit view. show password, click OK, and it lets me connect to our EC2 machine here. Okay, and it says, do you want to save password? I would say no, and then it's loading up EC2 machine on a public subnet. So per our diagram, we created an EC2 machine which is in public subnet. We use internet gateway, we associate the route to the public, and then now there's a NAT gateway there. So one more thing. Now, in order for me to connect to, let me show you. So if I want to connect to my EC2, which is on the private subnet. So let's say if I click here and obviously it's on private subnet. You can see this is VPC and this is private subnet. It doesn't have an public IP, so I won't be able to connect to public. So if I copy this and go back here and I click on this and I do this, it won't. Oh well, it will probably. Okay, let me check one more thing here. Why is it? It's probably because, let me show you. Get password, key. I have to check why this is letting me connect, which is amazing. Copy. And I will hit decrypt, and then I go back here. Yeah, so it's not letting me connect because, you know, it is on the private subnet. My outbound traffic going inside the VPC, it's not letting me get in because there is no public IP. And I got this message saying that client could not connect to remote control computer, connection might be enabled, blah blah blah. So what do we do is so how do we connect to this EC2? We would use this EC2 which we already are running, and we'll use, since this is on the same VPC, and I said any traffic which is 0.0 either can connect to internet or either it can connect to anything within the same subnet 0.0. Okay, so let me show you. So I would go here, this is my public one. I will click start, RDP, and then I would put in the IP address, not this one. So I would copy this, paste the IP, which is 10.2. This is locally inside the VPC. You can connect inside VPC. You can connect to each other. So if I hit connect, it just pulls up right away. I would copy this, go back here, administrator, and then I would go back here, password, and click OK, and it says you want to connect. Remote computer cannot be authenticated due to problem with its security. That's fine. Certificate is not there. Click yes, and now we are connected to a public subnet using public. Well, we connected to EC2 using public subnet. This is the IP address for the public subnet. Okay, so one thing also, let's say if so, now this will go to internet, because this is going to use NAT gateway to, maybe I should have used the NAT gateway later for you guys to have more clarity. So now if I, let's say if I can, I already assigned this IP address, but this can go to, so google.com, so google.com, only because the NAT gateway is there. So that will be it, I think. Once again, let's go back to this. So we actually created two subnets. I showed you how to create subnet, how to do route, how to do associate those route to NAT gateway and EC2, what is region, and again I will leave the link as well. Again, this was it's a little challenging to do VPC training because it's like sometimes a little detail needs to be required, but it is mostly so let's go here for a second, not this one. Okay, so NAT gateway we already talked about, customer gateway, virtual router. Again, I'll leave this link on the website. So our exercise was to how to deploy VPC, how to define public and private IP, subnets, associate those subnets to a route, and then network access and route table, internet gateway. Again, this was very informational. I hope I was able to explain a little bit of what VPC is, why do we use those. Actually, maybe I should show you one more thing here. Getting started. Overview, which we already talked. This is an example. You can follow this example as well as an example how to get to it. Let me see if I can get you here. Again, it tells you subnets basics, how it works, sizing. You can use this same. I would use this document to understand how it is. Obviously, route table, how the route table is defined. Everything I explained, it is in here, and you should be able to deploy a VPC and EC2 machine in public and private. All right, that will be it for today. I will leave some links on the website, on the GitHub as well, and feel free to reach out. Hope you liked the video, and as till next time, have yourself a great day. Thank you. Bye.